The hunting horn sounded across the frost-laden grounds of Thornwood Hall, and Drystan Mercer, Duke of Ravenmore, wished he had never accepted the crown's invitation. He dismounted his horse in the gravel courtyard, boots crunching against the frozen earth. The estate sprawled before him, all honey-colored stone and climbing ivy, exactly the sort of genteel country house that hosted royal hunts and endless tedious conversation. Smoke curled from a dozen chimneys, and the windows gleamed with candlelight against the gray December sky. He had attended dozens of gatherings like this one. This one should have been no different. Then she stepped through the front doors. Carenza Whitaker stood framed in the entrance, wearing deep green velvet that matched the winter pines behind the manor. Her dark hair was pinned up in an elaborate arrangement that exposed the graceful line of her neck, and her expression, when she saw him, went from polished hostess to frozen shock in the span of a single heartbeat. Drystan felt the ground shift beneath him. The breath left his lungs as if he had been struck. 6 years. 6 years since he had last seen her face, last heard her voice, last watched her walk away from him at the Ashworth ball, with her spine straight and her eyes blazing with fury and hurt. She had called him heartless. He had called her naive. Neither of them had spoken since, and he had told himself 1,000 times that it was better that way. Looking at her now, he knew he had been lying to himself. Every letter left unwritten, every invitation declined because she might be there. Every night spent staring at the ceiling of his empty chambers, wondering what might have been. All of it had been cowardice dressed up as indifference. Your Grace. Her voice was perfectly controlled, perfectly cold, betraying nothing of the shock he had seen flash across her features. She descended the steps with the kind of measured grace that suggested she was imagining pushing him into the ornamental pond. We were not informed you would be attending. Lady Carenza, he matched her tone precisely, though his pulse hammered against his throat. I wasn't informed you would be hosting. It is my estate now. Something flickered in her dark eyes, there and gone too quickly to name. My father passed 18 months ago. Thornwood Hall belongs to me. He had known about Lord Whitaker's death, had sent the appropriate condolences through the appropriate channels, penning words that felt hollow, even as he wrote them. What he had not known, what no one had thought to mention, was that Carenza had inherited the estate outright, that she had taken over its management single-handedly, that she had somehow convinced the Crown to hold the annual winter hunt on her grounds. The Carenza he remembered had been a debutante, all silk gowns and dance cards. This woman standing before him was something else entirely. My condolences, he said stiffly. Your father was a good man. Yes, he was. The implication hung in the air between them, sharp as winter frost. Unlike you. Other guests were arriving behind him. Drystan could hear the clatter of carriages, the murmur of voices, and the organized chaos of a major social event beginning. He should move, should allow her to greet her other guests, should find his assigned rooms, and avoid her for the next 5 days, as any sensible man would do. But his feet remained planted on the gravel, as if roots had grown through his boots. I can have my man prepare my carriage, he said quietly. Make my excuses to the prince. And insult the crown by departing before the hunt begins? Her smile was sharp enough to draw blood, and he remembered suddenly how much he had always loved that smile, even when it was aimed at him like a weapon. I think not, Your Grace. You accepted the invitation. You will stay. Will I? You will. She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell the faint rose water she had always worn, the scent triggering memories he had spent years trying to bury. Because if you leave now, everyone will wonder why. They will whisper about old scandals. They will ask questions neither of us wants to answer. She was right. Damn her. She was right. 5 days, he said through his teeth. 5 days, she confirmed. Surely we can manage civility for 5 days. Can we? I am capable of a great many things, Your Grace. Her chin lifted in defiance. "I have learned to be." The words carried weight he did not fully understand. Something had changed in her. Something beyond grief, beyond the passage of time. The Carenza he remembered had been 20 years old, all fire and passion and reckless honesty. This woman was tempered steel, forged in fires he could only imagine. He wondered what had forged her, and he hated himself for wanting to know. Lady Carenza. A servant appeared at her elbow, slightly breathless. "Lord Pemberton's carriage has arrived, and there is an issue with the East Wing accommodations that requires your attention." "Of course there is." She did not look away from Dryston, holding his gaze with an intensity that made his chest ache. "Have Mr. Harwick handle Lord Pemberton's greeting. I will address the accommodations personally." The servant vanished. Carenza finally broke their locked gaze, turning toward the house with the fluid grace he remembered from 100 ballrooms. "Your rooms are in the West Wing," she said over her shoulder, her voice professionally detached. "3rd floor, end of the corridor. Dinner is at 8. The prince arrives tomorrow morning. Try not to cause a scandal before then." She disappeared through the doors without waiting for his response. Dryston stood in the courtyard, watching the space where she had been, and felt 6 years of carefully constructed indifference crumble like ash in a winter wind. "Dryston." He turned. Piers Whitaker was striding toward him across the gravel, arms spread wide in welcome. The same easy grin he had worn since their days at Oxford. Carenza's younger brother, his oldest friend, the reason he had ever met her in the first place. "You came," Piers said, clasping his shoulder with genuine warmth. "I wasn't certain you would. Neither was I." Piers followed his gaze toward the house, his expression shifting to something more knowing. "Ah, you've seen her then. You might have warned me. Would you have come if I had?" Dryston said nothing. They both knew the answer. "She's different now," Piers said quietly, all traces of levity fading from his voice. "Running this estate, managing everything alone. Father's death nearly broke her, but she pulled herself together through sheer force of will. Refused every offer of help. Refused every suitor who came calling. Suitors. The word came out sharper than he intended. 3 proposals last season alone." Piers raised an eyebrow. She rejected them all. Rather spectacularly, in Lord Ashby's case. He still won't speak her name in polite company. Dryston felt something twist in his chest, something that felt uncomfortably like satisfaction, though he had no right to feel it. "That's not my concern," he said flatly. "Isn't it?" Piers studied him with knowing eyes that saw too much. "You never told me what happened between you two at the Ashworth ball. She won't speak of it. Neither will you. But whatever it was, it's been 6 years, Dryston. Perhaps it's time to let it rest." "There's nothing to let rest." "No? Then why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" Because he had. The ghost of every choice he had made wrong, every word he should have said differently. Every night he had spent staring at his ceiling, wondering what might have been if he had simply been brave enough to tell the truth. "Show me to my rooms," Dryston said, his voice rough. "I need to change before dinner." Piers sighed, but nodded, accepting the deflection. As they walked toward the house, Dryston glanced up at the windows of the West Wing, his eyes drawn there as if by magnetic force. A curtain moved on the 3rd floor. Someone had been watching, and he knew, with absolute certainty, that these 5 days were going to be the longest of his life. The West Wing accommodations were elegant, spacious, and directly across the corridor from the estate's private study, where Carenza Whitaker apparently spent most of her evenings reviewing ledgers and correspondence. Dryston discovered this when he stepped out of his rooms at 7:30, intending to make his way to dinner, and nearly collided with her in the narrow hallway. She was carrying a stack of papers and an oil lamp, and when she saw him, she stopped so abruptly that several documents slipped from her grasp and scattered across the floor. "Your Grace." She stepped back, clutching the remaining papers to her chest like a shield. I did not expect you to be wandering the corridors. I was not wandering. I was attending dinner, as instructed. He bent to gather the fallen papers, noting the columns of figures, the notations in her precise handwriting. Estate accounts, tenant records, the mundane machinery of running a property this size. Dinner is in the opposite direction, she said, accepting the papers from his outstretched hand. Their fingers brushed, and she pulled back as if burned. He paused. The corridor split both ways, and he had, admittedly, chosen poorly. The house is larger than I remembered. You have never been to this house. I meant houses in general. Something that might have been amusement crossed her face before she suppressed it ruthlessly. Turn left at the end of the hall. Follow the staircase down to the main floor. You will hear the other guests. Thank you. He should have walked away, should have followed her directions, and put as much distance between them as possible, as any sensible man would do. Instead, he found himself watching her, taking in the shadows beneath her eyes, the ink stains on her fingers, the slight tension in her shoulders that suggested she had been working for hours without rest. You manage all of this alone, he said. It was not a question. I do. That must be exhausting. It is my responsibility. Her chin lifted in that defiant way he remembered, that gesture he had always found simultaneously infuriating and captivating. I will not shirk it. I did not suggest you would. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Somewhere below, voices echoed. Laughter carried up the stairs. The other guests were gathering for dinner. They should join them. Neither moved. Why did you accept the Crown's invitation? She asked suddenly. You hate these events. You always have. I remember you complaining about them endlessly to peers. The prince requested my attendance specifically. Refusing would have been impolitic. Since when do you care about politics? Since I became Duke. The words came out harsher than he intended, edged with old grief. My father died 4 years ago, Lady Carenza. Circumstances change. Responsibilities shift. I am not the man I was at the Ashworth ball. Her expression shifted, something softening behind her careful mask. Neither am I the woman I was. I noticed. They stared at each other across the narrow corridor. The air between them felt charged, electric, like the moment before a storm breaks. The candlelight from her lamp cast dancing shadows across the walls, and Dryston found himself cataloging the changes 6 years had wrought, the new sharpness in her cheekbones, the confidence in her bearing, the weariness she tried so hard to hide. We should go to dinner, she said finally, her voice slightly unsteady. Yes. Still, neither moved. Lady Carenza. A servant appeared at the far end of the corridor, breathless from running. There's been an incident. Lord Carstone's rooms have flooded. The pipes in the east wing have burst from the cold. Carenza closed her eyes briefly, drawing a steadying breath. How bad? 3 rooms affected, my lady. Lord Carstone, Sir Hamish, and the Duke of Ravenmore's valet quarters. Dryston stiffened. My valet's quarters? The water damage is significant, Your Grace. We will need to relocate your man and your belongings immediately. Carenza was already moving, all efficiency and command. The weary woman of moments ago replaced by a decisive leader. Have Mrs. Pritchard prepare the reserve rooms in the north wing. Move Lord Carstone and Sir Hamish immediately. As for the Duke's arrangements, she trailed off, calculating logistics with visible frustration. The north wing is full with the prince's advance party. The east wing is damaged. The south wing houses the female guests. I can share with Piers, Dryston offered. Piers is already sharing with Lord Hatherwick. The hunting party exceeded our expected numbers by a considerable margin. She pressed her fingers to her temples, and he saw the exhaustion she had been hiding crack through. There is only one solution. Your valet will take the servants' quarters in the attic. Your belongings will be moved to the blue room. Which is where? She did not meet his eyes. Adjacent to mine. There is a connecting door, but it locks from both sides. The servant looked between them nervously. Drystan felt his pulse quicken, despite his best efforts at composure. "That seems inappropriate," he said carefully. "It is inappropriate. It is also the only option, unless you wish to sleep in the stables." Her voice was clipped, professional, betraying nothing. "The Blue Room has its own entrance from the main corridor. No one need know it connects to my chambers. We will simply be neighbors for the duration of the hunt." Neighbors. 5 days, Your Grace. Surely you can manage 5 days of proximity without causing a scandal. She was throwing his own words back at him, or rather, her words to him, repurposed. He should refuse, should insist on alternative arrangements, no matter how inconvenient. Should do anything other than agree to sleep 10 feet from the woman he had spent 6 years trying desperately to forget. "Fine," he heard himself say. "The Blue Room will suffice." Relief and something else, something he could not name, crossed her face. "I will have your things moved within the hour. Now, we truly must go to dinner. The other guests will talk if we arrive together." "Will they not talk regardless?" "Not if we are careful." She straightened her shoulders, becoming the perfect hostess once more, every trace of vulnerability hidden away. "You go first. I will follow in 10 minutes. We will not acknowledge each other beyond basic courtesy." "Is that what you want?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. Something raw flashed in her eyes, gone before he could identify it. "What I want is irrelevant, Your Grace. What matters is surviving these 5 days with our reputations intact." She stepped past him, close enough that her sleeve brushed his arm, and he caught another hint of rosewater. "The corridor. Turn left. Follow the noise." Then she was gone, vanishing into her study, the door clicking shut behind her with quiet finality. Drystan stood alone in the hallway, heart pounding, knowing with absolute certainty that he was walking into a trap, and knowing, worse still, that part of him wanted to be caught. Dinner was an elaborate affair of 7 courses and endless small talk. Drystan sat at the far end of the table from Carenza, as protocol demanded, but he felt her presence like a brand against his skin, aware of her every movement, even when he wasn't looking directly at her. She was magnificent. There was no other word for it. She commanded the table with effortless grace, guiding conversation away from dangerous topics, smoothing tensions between rival guests, ensuring that every glass was filled and every ego properly stroked. The girl he had known 6 years ago had been clever and quick-witted. This woman was formidable. "She's quite something, isn't she?" Drystan turned. The man beside him was perhaps 30, fair-haired and handsome in an obvious practiced way, with the sort of smile that suggested he knew exactly how attractive he was and expected everyone else to acknowledge it. "Forgive me. Godric Hale, Viscount Ashbury." The man extended his hand with studied elegance. "I don't believe we've been introduced." Drystan Mercer. Ravenmore. "Ah, the elusive Duke." Hale's smile sharpened with interest. "I've heard stories about you. None of them complimentary, I'm afraid." "I wouldn't expect them to be." Hale laughed, though his eyes remained calculating, assessing. "I appreciate a man who doesn't bother with false modesty. Tell me, how do you know our lovely hostess?" "Her brother and I were at Oxford together." "Ah, yes. Piers." Hale glanced down the table toward where Piers was engaged in animated conversation with a red-haired woman. "Good man, terrible card player. But I meant how you know Lady Carenza specifically." Drystan kept his expression carefully neutral. "We have met at social functions over the years." "Have you?" Hale's tone suggested he knew more than he was saying. "Curious. When I asked her about you earlier, she went quite pale. I assumed there was history between you." "You assume incorrectly." "Do I?" Hale leaned closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial murmur. "You see, I have particular interest in Lady Carenza. I intend to make her an offer before this hunt concludes. A rather significant offer, if you take my meaning. Marriage. The word hung unspoken between them, heavy with implication. I wish you luck, Drystan said flatly. Do you? How generous. Hale's smile didn't waver. Though I confess, I'm surprised you have no objection, given the way you've been watching her all evening. I have not been watching her. Your Grace, you've barely looked at anything else. Hale reached for his wine glass with deliberate casualness. I recognize the signs of a man with unfinished business. Whatever happened between you and Lady Carenza, it clearly isn't resolved. Drystan's jaw flexed. There is nothing between Lady Carenza and myself. Then you won't mind if I pursue her. I am neither her keeper nor her brother. Your pursuit is none of my concern. Excellent. Hale raised his glass in a mock toast. Then, we understand each other. The courses continued. Drystan ate mechanically, tasting nothing, his attention fixed on Hale's every movement. The man was charming, attentive, directing his considerable social skills toward Carenza whenever the conversation allowed. She responded with polite disinterest, but Hale was persistent, undeterred by her lack of encouragement. By dessert, Drystan's hands were clenched beneath the table. Careful, Piers murmured, appearing at his side as the guests began to rise. You look ready to challenge Hale to a duel. Don't be absurd. I know that expression, Drystan. You wore it at Oxford whenever someone touched your things without permission. Piers lowered his voice further. She's not yours to protect. I'm not protecting anyone. No? Then why have you been glaring at Hale like he insulted your mother? Before Drystan could respond, a commotion erupted near the drawing room doors. Voices raised in excitement, then concern. A woman gasped. What's happened? Carenza's voice cut through the noise, calm but commanding. A footman rushed forward, his face pale. My lady, there's been an accident. Lord Pemberton's carriage. It overturned on the south road coming from the village. His lordship is injured. The room erupted. Guests surged forward, demanding details. Carenza began issuing orders with military precision, sending servants for the physician, directing footmen to prepare a recovery room, organizing the chaos with practiced efficiency. In the confusion, Drystan noticed Hale moving toward her, positioning himself at her side, ready to offer assistance, ready to make himself indispensable. Something snapped inside him. Drystan crossed the room in 4 strides, reaching Carenza before Hale could. What do you need? She looked up at him, startled by his sudden proximity. Your Grace, this isn't... Tell me what you need. I have experience with injuries. Military training. It wasn't a lie. He had served briefly with the cavalry before his father's death forced him home to assume the title. He had seen wounds, treated them when necessary, held dying men's hands when nothing more could be done. It was more than Hale could offer. Carenza hesitated only a moment, her sharp eyes assessing him. Come with me. The rest of you, please remain here. Mrs. Pritchard will ensure your comfort. She swept from the room, Drystan following close behind. Behind them, he heard Hale's sharp intake of breath. They found Lord Pemberton in the entrance hall, being carried in on a makeshift stretcher by 2 footmen. The man was conscious but pale, his face twisted in pain, his leg bent at an unnatural angle below the knee. Blood stained his riding breeches, where the bone had nearly broken through. Broken, Drystan confirmed after a brief examination. Clean break, fortunately. The physician can set it, but he'll need to remain immobile for weeks. Weeks? Pemberton groaned through gritted teeth. I'll miss the entire hunt. You'll miss more than that if infection sets in. Drystan looked at Carenza. He needs to be moved carefully, somewhere warm, away from the other guests. The recovery room in the east wing. It's isolated, quiet. She caught herself. But the pipes, have them repaired by morning. For now, blankets, hot water, clean linens. He was already directing the footmen, his military training taking over instinctively. and send someone to ride for a surgeon. The local physician can set the bone, but a surgeon should examine him within the week. Carenza stared at him, something shifting in her expression. You've done this before. Yes. Where? It doesn't matter. He met her eyes, holding her gaze steadily. What matters is that Pemberton receives proper care. Let me help. Something cracked in the wall she had maintained all evening, just slightly. All right, she said quietly. Help me. They worked together for the next hour, coordinating servants, ensuring Pemberton was comfortable, communicating with the physician when he arrived. It was strange, Drystan thought, how naturally they moved around each other, how easily they anticipated what the other needed, as if 6 years of separation had never happened. When the crisis was handled, and Pemberton was resting comfortably, they stood in the empty corridor outside his room, exhausted and oddly peaceful. Thank you, Carenza said. You didn't have to involve yourself. I wanted to. She studied him, head tilted. Why? Because you needed help. He paused. And because Hale was going to offer his assistance, and I couldn't stomach the thought of him playing hero in your house. Her eyes widened. That's incredibly petty. Yes. And possessive. Also yes. We are nothing to each other, Your Grace. You made that abundantly clear 6 years ago. The words landed like a blow, because she was right. He had made it clear, had said words he could never take back, words that had haunted him every day since. I know, he said quietly. But that doesn't mean I've stopped. He caught himself. Stopped what? Caring? Thinking about her? Wanting what he had thrown away? Stopped what? She pressed, her voice barely above a whisper. The corridor was empty. The house was quiet. They were alone, truly alone, for the first time since his arrival. Nothing. He stepped back. Forget I said anything. Good night, Lady Carenza. He turned to leave. Drystan. His name on her lips stopped him cold. She hadn't called him by his Christian name in 6 years. The connecting door, she said softly. Between our rooms. I haven't locked it yet. He turned back. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. Should I? The question hung between them, loaded with meaning neither of them was ready to acknowledge. Yes, he said, his voice rough. You should. He walked away before he could change his mind, feeling her gaze on his back the entire way. But when he reached his room, when he stood before the connecting door and pressed his palm against the wood, he heard nothing from the other side. No lock turning. No bolt sliding home. Just silence. And he knew, with terrifying certainty, that tomorrow would change everything. Morning came gray and cold, the sky heavy with the promise of snow. Drystan had slept poorly, his dreams filled with dark hair and sharp words, and a door that remained unlocked through the endless night. He dressed early and descended to the breakfast room, hoping to eat before the other guests stirred. Instead, he found Carenza already there, seated alone at the long table, a cup of tea cooling beside an untouched plate. She looked exhausted. The shadows beneath her eyes had deepened overnight, and there was a tension in her shoulders that suggested she had slept no better than he had. You're up early, he said from the doorway. She didn't startle, didn't even look up. I've been awake since 4. Lord Pemberton developed a fever in the night. The physician says it's not serious, but I wanted to be certain he was comfortable. You sat with him. Someone had to. He moved to the sideboard, filling a plate he didn't want. You have servants for that. A housekeeper, a staff of 30 from what I observed. And I have responsibilities. Now she did look at him, her gaze sharp despite her fatigue. This is my house. These are my guests. When something goes wrong, it falls to me. You'll make yourself ill. Your concern is noted and dismissed. He sat across from her, close enough to see the faint tremor in her hands as she lifted her teacup. She was running on fumes, holding herself together through sheer force of will. When did you last sleep properly? he asked quietly. That's none of your concern. Carenza. Her cup clattered against the saucer. Don't use my name like we're friends, like you have any right to. I'm not trying to claim rights. I'm trying to understand. He leaned forward, holding her gaze. 6 years ago, you were the daughter of a wealthy man with no responsibilities beyond choosing which gown to wear to which ball. Now you're running an estate, hosting the crown, managing a crisis, and you look like you haven't slept in weeks. What happened? My father died. That's what happened. That's not all of it. Her jaw set. For a long moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then quietly, she said, My father's death was not peaceful, Your Grace. It was prolonged. Painful. I nursed him for 8 months, while his mind deteriorated and his body failed. I held his hand when he took his last breath, and I was the only one there when it happened. Draistan went still, and then I discovered that his steward had been embezzling funds for years, she continued, her voice flat, emotionless. That the estate was nearly bankrupt, that everything he had worked to build was crumbling, and no one had thought to tell me until I was standing in the ruins. Carenza. So I learned, she pressed on, ignoring his interruption. I learned to manage accounts and negotiate with creditors and charm potential investors. I learned to dismiss incompetent servants and hire competent ones. I learned to smile when I wanted to scream and stand tall when I wanted to collapse. I learned to survive, Your Grace, because no one was going to do it for me. Piers was in London, drowning his grief in cards and women and anything else that would make him forget. No bitterness in her tone, just exhaustion. I don't blame him. We all cope differently, but it meant I was alone. The weight of her words settled over him like a physical burden. He thought of his own father's death, sudden and unexpected, a heart attack that had stolen the man in minutes rather than months. He had grieved, yes, but he had not watched, had not nursed, had not held vigil while someone he loved faded away piece by piece. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it with everything he had. For what? For not being there. The words came out before he could stop them, dragged from somewhere deep. For not reaching out after your father passed, for letting 6 years of silence stand between us when I should have... Should have what? Her eyes met his, dark and unreadable. Written a letter, paid a condolence call, pretended that what happened at the Ashworth ball didn't matter. What happened at the Ashworth ball was my fault. She went very still, as if the air itself had frozen. I was cruel, he continued, the confession dragging out of him like broken glass. I said things I didn't mean because I was afraid of what I did mean, and I've regretted it every day since. Draistan, you asked me to dance. The memory was knife-sharp, preserved in perfect detail despite 6 years of distance. You asked me, and I refused, and when you demanded to know why, I told you that I had no interest in entertaining a child's infatuation. Her face went pale. I remember. I called you foolish, naive. I said that whatever you thought you felt for me was nothing more than a schoolgirl fantasy, and that I had no intention of indulging it. I remember, she said again, her voice barely a whisper. I lied. The words hung between them, irrevocable, impossible to take back. Every word of it was a lie. I said those things because the alternative was admitting that I felt the same, that I had felt the same for months, that watching you laugh with other men and dance with other partners was driving me slowly mad, that every time you entered a room, I forgot how to breathe properly. Tears gathered in her eyes. She blinked them back fiercely, refusing to let them fall. Why are you telling me this now? Because I spent 6 years running from it, and I'm tired. He reached across the table, his fingers stopping just short of hers. Because you deserved the truth then, and you deserve it now. Because last night, when I saw Hale looking at you, like you were something to be acquired. I wanted to put my fist through his face, and that told me everything I needed to know about where I still stand. Where you still stand, she repeated slowly. Exactly where I stood 6 years ago. His voice dropped. Wanting you, unable to have you, destroying everything rather than admit it. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away angrily. This doesn't change anything, she said. I know. We can't go back. I know that too. Then why? Her voice broke. Why tell me now? Why make me feel this when I've spent 6 years learning not to? He pulled his hand back, though it cost him everything. Because you asked me once to be honest with you, and I wasn't. I'm trying to correct that mistake, even if it's too late. Footsteps echoed in the corridor, other guests approaching, the day beginning. Their moment of privacy was ending. Carenza stood, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. The prince arrives in 2 hours. I have preparations to oversee. Of course. She moved toward the door, then stopped. Without turning, she said quietly, The connecting door. I still haven't locked it. Then she was gone. Drystan sat alone in the breakfast room, his untouched plate before him, and wondered if honesty had been a gift or a curse. The prince arrived with all the fanfare the crown demanded. Trumpets, banners, a procession of servants and attendants that doubled the occupants of Thornwood Hall in a single morning. Prince Aldrich was younger than Drystan had expected, perhaps 5 and 20, with shrewd eyes that missed nothing and a reputation for preferring substance over ceremony. He greeted Carenza warmly, complimenting her management of the estate, expressing genuine concern over Lord Pemberton's injury. Lady Carenza has transformed Thornwood into something remarkable, the prince said during the welcome reception. I confess, when I first proposed holding the hunt here, my advisors were skeptical. A woman running an estate alone? Unprecedented, they said. But I believed in her capabilities, and I see now that my faith was well placed. Carenza inclined her head gracefully. Your Highness is too kind. Not at all. I value competence above all else, regardless of its source. The prince's gaze swept the assembled guests. I trust the accommodations are satisfactory. No further disasters beyond poor Pemberton's mishap? Everything is well in hand, Your Highness. Excellent. Then let the hunt begin. The first day's hunting was organized chaos. Riders streamed across the frost-hardened fields, hounds baying, horns sounding. Drystan rode near the back of the pack, more interested in watching than participating. Specifically, watching Carenza. She rode like she had been born in the saddle, her dark hair streaming behind her, her cheeks flushed with cold and exhilaration. The morning light caught her profile as she turned to speak with another rider, and Drystan felt his chest tighten with an emotion he could no longer deny. She was magnificent, and she was being pursued. Not by the foxes. Godric Hale had positioned himself at her side from the moment they mounted. He rode close, too close, leaning in to murmur comments that made her smile politely. He handed her a flask of something warming when they paused to rest the horses. He helped her dismount when they stopped for the midday meal, his hands lingering at her waist. Drystan watched it all with mounting fury. You're going to break your reins if you grip them any tighter. He turned. A woman had ridden up beside him, red-haired and sharp-featured, with an amused smile that suggested she had been observing him for some time. Lady Isolde Vane, she said. I don't believe we've been introduced, though I've certainly heard of you. The Duke, who never attends anything, suddenly appearing at Thornwood Hall. The gossips are having a field day. I'm sure they are. They're also speculating about why you've spent the entire morning glaring at Viscount Ashbury. Her smile widened. Care to enlighten me? I haven't been glaring. Your Grace, you've been glaring so intensely, I'm surprised he hasn't burst into flames. She guided her horse closer, lowering her voice. Let me guess. It has something to do with our lovely hostess. My relationship with Lady Carenza is none of your concern. Relationship? How interesting. I had heard there was history, but I assumed it was exaggerated. Lady Isolde's eyes sparkled with dangerous curiosity. Tell me, does Hale know he has competition? There is no competition. Lady Carenza is free to entertain whatever suitors she chooses. Is she? Then why do you look ready to challenge him to pistols at dawn? Because he was. God help him, he was. Every smile Carenza gave Hale, every polite laugh at his witticisms, every moment of her attention directed elsewhere felt like a knife twisting in Drystan's gut. Forgive me, he said stiffly. I should rejoin the hunt. He spurred his horse forward, leaving Lady Isolde's knowing laughter behind. The afternoon brought fresh torment. Hale was relentless, monopolizing Carenza's attention at every opportunity. By the time they returned to Thornwood Hall, Drystan's jaw ached from clenching. He was striding toward his rooms, desperate for solitude, when he heard voices from the library. The door was ajar, and through the gap, he could see Carenza standing by the fireplace, Hale uncomfortably close. I've made my intentions clear, Lady Carenza. Hale's voice was smooth, confident. I see no reason to delay. Say the word, and I will speak to the prince tonight. He supports the match. A formal announcement at the hunt's conclusion would be perfectly timed. Drystan's blood went cold. Lord Ashbury, I appreciate your interest. Godric, please. Lord Ashbury. Carenza's tone cooled noticeably. I appreciate your interest, but I have given you no encouragement. An announcement would be premature. Premature? I've been courting you for 3 months. You've been visiting Thornwood for 3 months. That is not the same as courting. Hale's expression hardened. You're rejecting me. I'm asking for time. Time? He laughed, though there was no humor in it. Time for what? To entertain other offers? To compare your options? His voice dropped dangerously. Or time to determine whether the Duke of Ravenmore is still available? Silence. Oh yes, I've noticed the way he watches you, the way you watch him. Hale moved closer, and Carenza stepped back, her spine hitting the mantelpiece. There's history there, isn't there? Something unresolved, something that makes you hesitate, when a perfectly suitable man offers you everything you could want. You're overstepping. Am I? He was too close now, crowding her. Or am I simply stating what everyone can see? You're pining for a man who treated you cruelly years ago, while I stand before you, offering genuine regard. Step back, Lord Ashbury. When you answer me, is it Ravenmore? Is he the reason you keep refusing me? Drystan pushed through the door. I believe the lady asked you to step back. Hale spun, his face flushing with anger. This is a private conversation. It ceased being private when you began making demands. Dristan moved between them, positioning himself as a barrier. Lady Carenza, are you all right? I'm fine. Her voice was steady, but he could see the rapid pulse at her throat. Lord Ashbury was just leaving. Was I? Hale's eyes narrowed. How convenient that Ravenmore appears the moment you need rescuing, almost as if he were waiting outside the door. I was passing by. Were you? Hale smiled thinly. The West Wing is nowhere near the library. You came looking for her. Drystan didn't deny it. Couldn't deny it. Whatever exists between Lady Carenza and myself is none of your concern, he said quietly. What is my concern is a man who corners a woman and refuses to respect her clearly stated wishes. Leave now, or I will make you leave. The threat hung in the air. For a long moment, Hale held his ground. Then, with a mocking bow, he stepped back. My apologies, Lady Carenza. I seem to have overstepped. His gaze moved to Drystan. But this isn't finished, Ravenmore. Whatever game you're playing, I intend to win. He left. In the silence that followed, Carenza released a shaky breath. You didn't need to do that. Yes, I did. He'll cause trouble now. He'll tell people. Let him. Dristan turned to face her. Are you truly all right? She pressed her fingers to her temples. He's been pressuring me for weeks. Tonight was simply more direct than usual. Has he touched you? Threatened you? No, nothing like that. He's just... She searched for the word. Relentless. Then I'll make certain he understands that relentless is no longer an option. Her eyes found his. Why? Because no one corners you in a library and demands answers you don't want to give. His voice was rough. Because you've spent 18 months handling everything alone, and you shouldn't have to handle this too. That's not your decision to make. I know. He stepped closer. But I'm making it anyway. Something shifted between them. The air grew heavy, charged with everything unsaid. The connecting door, she whispered. What about it? I still haven't locked it. He stared at her. Carenza. I don't know what that means. Her voice wavered. I don't know what any of this means. But I couldn't bring myself to turn that lock. And I need you to understand that I don't know why. His hand rose, almost of its own accord, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Maybe, he said quietly, we should figure it out together. The second day of the hunt dawned clear and bright, a perfect winter morning that should have lifted everyone's spirits. Instead, Dristan felt the weight of a sleepless night pressing behind his eyes. He had stood at that connecting door for hours, hand raised to knock, hand falling away. Repeat. Repeat. Until exhaustion finally claimed him sometime after 3. He had not knocked, but he had heard her, pacing on the other side, stopping at the door. Her breathing, soft and unsteady, audible through the wood. Neither of them had made a move. Now, in the bright light of morning, surrounded by guests and servants and the relentless demands of the hunt, that midnight tension felt like a fever dream. Except it wasn't. Except he could still feel her fingers trembling when he had touched her hair. Except he could still hear her voice wavering when she admitted she hadn't locked the door. You look terrible, Piers observed over breakfast. Thank you. I mean it. Did you sleep at all? Enough. Piers studied him with uncomfortable perception. Something happened, with Carenza. Don't bother denying it. I saw Hale this morning, and he was in a foul mood, muttering about interference and inappropriate attachments. What did you do? I stopped him from pressuring your sister in the library. Piers went still. Pressuring her how? He was demanding an answer to his proposal, cornered her by the fireplace, refused to step back when she asked. That bastard. Piers's hands clenched. I'll kill him. Get in line. Dristan lowered his voice. But we need to be careful. Hale has the prince's ear, and he's clearly willing to cause trouble. If he spreads rumors about Carenza and me, are there rumors to spread? The question hung between them. I don't know what there is, Dristan admitted. I know what I feel. I know what I said to her yesterday. But I don't know where we stand, and I don't want to presume. What did you say to her? The truth, about the Ashworth ball, about why I said those things, about... He stopped. About everything. Piers exhaled slowly. Finally. You're not surprised. Dristan, I've known you were in love with my sister since you were 24 years old. Piers shook his head. I've been waiting 6 years for you to admit it. You never said anything. It wasn't my place. And frankly, after what you said to her at that ball, I wasn't sure you deserved the chance. He met Dristan's eyes. But I've watched her these past 18 months. I've seen how hard she's worked, how much she's sacrificed. And I've seen her reject every suitor who came calling, including men far more suitable than Hale. Why did she reject them? I think you know why. Before Dristan could respond, the hunting horn sounded. Guests began streaming toward the stables, the day's activities demanding attention. Be careful, Piers said quietly, with her heart and with Hale. Neither situation will end well if you make mistakes. The hunt was a blur. Dristan rode mechanically, following the pack without truly participating, his attention fixed on Carenza. She was avoiding Hale. The change was obvious to anyone watching closely. Where yesterday she had tolerated his presence with polite disinterest, Today she actively evaded him, positioning herself near other guests, engaging in conversations that excluded him. Hale noticed. His expression grew darker as the morning progressed. By midday, the tension was palpable. The hunting party stopped to rest near a frozen lake, servants distributing warm drinks and cold meat. Dristan positioned himself near Carenza, close enough to intervene if Hale approached, but far enough to avoid obvious impropriety. "You're hovering," she murmured without looking at him. "I'm standing." "You're hovering protectively while pretending to admire the scenery. It's not subtle." "I wasn't trying to be subtle." Her lips twitched, almost a smile. "Hale is watching us." "Good." "It's not good. He'll tell people." "Let him." Now she did look at him. "You keep saying that. But you don't understand what's at stake. My reputation is already precarious. A woman running an estate alone, hosting hunts, refusing proposals. Society tolerates it because I've given them no scandal. If Hale suggests there's something between us, then we give them something else to talk about." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He stepped closer, deliberately visible to anyone watching. "I mean that Hale's weapon is implication, the suggestion that you're rejecting him for someone inappropriate. But what if the alternative wasn't inappropriate at all?" "I don't understand." "What if," Dristan said carefully, "the Duke of Ravenmore was openly courting you? What if his attentions were public, sanctioned, and entirely proper? What would Hale have to gossip about then?" Her breath caught. "You're suggesting a courtship, public and official." His heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady. "It would silence the rumors, protect your reputation, and give Hale no ammunition." "That's not. We can't." "Why not?" "Because it would be a lie." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Because pretending to court me while actually what?" She couldn't answer. Neither could he, because they both knew the truth. It wouldn't be pretending. Not anymore. Lady Carenza. Lady Isolde appeared at her elbow, all sharp smiles and sharper observations. "The prince is asking for you. Something about tomorrow's arrangements." "Of course." Carenza stepped away from Dristan, her composure sliding back into place like armor. "Excuse me, Your Grace." She walked toward the prince's party, her spine straight and her head high. But Dristan saw the slight tremor in her hands. "That was quite the intimate conversation," Lady Isolde observed, remaining at his side. "We were discussing hunting strategies." "Were you?" From here, it looked rather more personal. Her eyes glittered. "I should warn you, Ravenmore. Hale isn't a graceful loser. Whatever you're planning with Lady Carenza, be prepared for resistance." "I'm not planning anything." "No? Then why did I just hear you propose a public courtship?" She laughed at his expression. "Sound carries over frozen lakes. You should be more careful." Before he could respond, she glided away, leaving him with the cold certainty that their conversation had not been private. The afternoon hunt ended early, when clouds rolled in, threatening snow. Guests retreated to the warmth of Thornwood Hall, gathering in the drawing room for tea and cards. Dristan found himself seated near the fireplace, watching Carenza manage her guests with effortless grace, while his mind raced. Lady Isolde knew about his proposal, which meant others would know soon. The gossip would spread, mutate, and become something neither he nor Carenza could control, unless they controlled it first. He was still calculating options when Carenza appeared at his side. "Walk with me," she murmured. "The gallery." 5 minutes. She drifted away before he could respond. 5 minutes later, Dristan slipped from the drawing room and made his way to the portrait gallery on the second floor. Carenza was already there, standing before a painting of her father, her arms wrapped around herself. "Lady Isolde spoke to me," she said without preamble. "She knows what you proposed." "I'm aware," she told me as well. "By tomorrow morning everyone will know." Carenza turned to face him. "Which means we have a choice. We deny it and let the rumors spiral, or we confirm it and take control of the narrative." And which would you prefer? She was silent for a long moment. Then quietly, she said, I spent 6 years convincing myself I didn't feel anything for you. 6 years telling myself that what happened at the Ashworth ball was proof of your true character. 6 years learning to survive without you. I know. And then you arrived here, and everything I had built started crumbling. Her voice trembled. I don't know if I can do this, Drystan. I don't know if I can pretend to court you when every moment will be real. He crossed the space between them. His hands found her shoulders, steadying her, grounding them both. Then don't pretend. He stepped closer, close enough to see the pulse beating rapidly at her throat. Don't pretend, he repeated. Let it be real. Let me court you properly, publicly, with full intention. No fiction, no performance. Just truth for once between us. You're serious. Completely. But your obligations, your family, the expectations, mean nothing compared to this. His thumbs traced circles on her shoulders. I lost you once because I was too afraid to be honest. I won't make that mistake again. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. The prince will need to be informed, she said shakily, and Piers, and the guests will talk. Let them. Hale will be furious. Hale can go to hell. She laughed, a wet, broken sound. This is mad. Completely mad. We barely know each other anymore. Then we'll learn. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. Day by day. Conversation by conversation. Until you know me again, and I know you, and whatever this is between us has room to grow. And if it doesn't work, then at least we'll have tried. He brushed a tear from her cheek. At least we'll know. She stared at him for an endless moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. All right. All right? Court me. Her voice was barely a whisper. Publicly. Properly. For real. Drystan felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been sealed shut for 6 years. Starting now? Starting now. He leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead. Gentle. Reverent. A promise. Then let me escort you back to the drawing room, he said. On my arm, where everyone can see. She took a shaky breath. Then she placed her hand in his. And together, they walked out to face whatever came next. The drawing room fell silent when they entered. Every conversation ceased. Every head turned. Drystan felt the weight of every gaze as he guided Carenza through the doorway, her hand resting on his arm, in the unmistakable posture of courtship. Conversations stuttered. Teacups paused halfway to lips. Lady Isolde's smile turned knowing. Hale's expression darkened to thunder. Well, Piers said loudly, breaking the tension. It's about bloody time. Nervous laughter rippled through the room. The spell broke. Conversations resumed, though now they carried an undercurrent of speculation and whispered commentary. The prince rose from his chair, crossing to meet them. His eyes moved between Drystan and Carenza with sharp assessment. Ravenmore. Lady Carenza. His voice was carefully neutral. I wasn't aware there was an understanding between you. It's recent, Your Highness. Drystan kept his tone steady. Very recent. But I felt it appropriate to make my intentions known publicly, rather than allow rumor to precede fact. How refreshingly direct. The prince studied Carenza. And you, Lady Carenza, is this arrangement to your satisfaction? It is, Your Highness. Her voice didn't waver, though Drystan could feel the tension in her fingers. The Duke and I have known each other for many years. Recent circumstances have simply clarified what was perhaps always present. Poetic. The prince's lips curved in what might have been approval. I approve. A strong alliance between Thornwood and Ravenmore would benefit the crown considerably. You have my blessing to continue your courtship. He returned to his seat, and the room exhaled collectively. But Hale was already moving. How convenient, he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. The elusive Duke suddenly discovers romantic interest in a woman he's ignored for 6 years. One might almost think it was arranged. Lord Ashbury. Dryston's voice dropped to ice. I would choose my next words very carefully. Would you? Hale's smile was razor thin. Because from where I stand, this looks remarkably like a man staking a claim on property he has no right to. Property? Carenza stepped forward, her eyes blazing. I am no one's property, Lord Ashbury. Not yours, not his, not anyone's. Of course not. Forgive my poor choice of words. Hale's tone dripped false contrition. I merely meant that the timing seemed suspicious. 3 days ago you barely acknowledged each other. Now you're publicly courting. What changed? I fail to see how that concerns you, Dristan said. It concerns me because I've been courting Lady Carenza for months, because I offered her a respectable match, a title, a future, and she refused me. Hale's mask slipped, revealing the bitterness beneath. Then you arrive, and suddenly she's receptive. One wonders what you offered that I couldn't. The implication hung in the air like poison. That's enough. Piers materialized at Carenza's side, his easy manner gone cold. You're speaking about my sister, Hale. Another word, and we'll settle this outside. Peace, gentlemen. The prince's voice cut through the tension with royal authority. Lord Ashbury, your disappointment is understandable, but Lady Carenza is free to accept whatever suitor she chooses. I suggest you accept that gracefully. Hale's jaw worked. For a moment, Dristan thought he might push further. Then, with a stiff bow, he retreated. My apologies, Your Highness. Lady Carenza, I spoke out of turn. He stalked from the room. The evening proceeded, but the atmosphere remained charged. Dristan stayed close to Carenza, hyper-aware of whispers and glances following them. By the time the guests began retiring, exhaustion pulled at both of them. That could have gone better, Carenza murmured as they climbed the stairs to the west wing. It could have gone worse. Could it? She laughed tiredly. Hale all but accused us of impropriety in front of the prince. By tomorrow, half the guests will be speculating about what exactly happened in the library. Let them speculate. The prince approved our courtship. That's what matters. They reached the corridor where their rooms waited. The connecting door hung between them, unspoken, but impossible to ignore. I should retire, Carenza said quietly. Tomorrow will be long. Yes. Neither moved. Dristan. Her voice was barely a whisper. What you said in the gallery, about this being real, did you mean it? Every word. And what happens when the hunt ends? When you return to Ravenmoor and I remain here? How does a courtship survive 200 miles of distance? Letters, visits, whatever it takes. He stepped closer. I've wasted 6 years, Carenza. I don't intend to waste another day. Her breath caught. You make it sound simple. It won't be simple, but it will be worth it. She looked up at him, her dark eyes luminous in the candlelight. The connecting door. What about it? I'm going to unlock it tonight. Her voice trembled. I'm going to unlock it, and I'm going to leave it open. And if you want to come through, I won't stop you. The words hit him like a physical force. Carenza, don't say anything. Don't promise anything. She took a shaky breath. Just decide. She slipped into her room, the door clicking shut behind her. Dryston stood alone in the corridor, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. This was madness. Complete, utter madness. If anyone discovered them, her reputation would be destroyed. Everything she had built, everything she had sacrificed, would crumble. He should go to his own room, lock his side of the connecting door, maintain the propriety that society demanded. He should. He didn't. 10 minutes later, he stood before the connecting door, his hand pressed flat against the wood. On the other side, silence. Then, softly, the sound of a lock turning. The door swung open. Carenza stood in her nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders, her feet bare against the cold floor. She looked terrified. She looked beautiful. She looked like everything he had ever wanted and never allowed himself to have. "You came," she whispered. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I thought—" She stopped. "I don't know what I thought." He crossed the threshold. This was the point of no return. He knew it. She knew it. Whatever happened next would change everything. "We shouldn't," he said, even as his hands found her waist. "I know. If anyone discovers, I don't care." Her fingers curled into his shirt. "I'm so tired of caring. I'm so tired of doing what I should instead of what I want." "What do you want?" "You." The word was raw, desperate. "I want you. I've wanted you for 6 years, and I'm done pretending otherwise." He kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. It was 6 years of longing compressed into a single moment, her mouth opening under his, her body pressing against him, her hands pulling him closer. They stumbled backward, toward her bed, shedding propriety along with their restraint. His hands tangled in her hair, her nails scraped down his back. They fell together, breathless, desperate. Two people finally allowing themselves to feel what they had denied for too long. "This changes everything," he gasped against her throat. "I know. There's no going back. I don't want to go back." She pulled his face to hers. "I want forward, with you, whatever that means." He kissed her again, deeper, slower, savoring what he had almost lost forever. And when they finally surrendered to each other completely, when all the barriers crumbled, and there was nothing between them but skin and heat and the terrible, wonderful knowledge that this couldn't last, Dristan knew with absolute certainty that he would never let her go again. Dawn came too soon, gray light filtering through unfamiliar curtains like an unwelcome intruder. Dristan woke to the warmth of Carenza's body pressed against his side, her breath soft and even against his shoulder. For one perfect moment, everything was peace. The world outside these walls ceased to exist, and there was only this, her presence, her trust, the impossible gift of waking beside her. Then reality crashed down. He sat up abruptly, his mind racing through the implications of what they had done, her reputation, his obligations, the guests sleeping in rooms throughout the house, any servant entering early, any maid come to light the fire. "Stop thinking so loudly." Carenza's voice was thick with sleep. She reached for him, her fingers trailing down his arm. "You're panicking." "I'm being realistic." He pulled away, searching for his discarded shirt. "If anyone saw me enter your room last night, if anyone sees me leave this morning, the servants don't enter until I ring for them. I made that clear years ago." She sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. "No one knows. No one knows yet." He found his shirt, pulled it over his head. "But secrets don't stay secret. Not in houses full of guests and gossip." "Then what do you suggest?" The coldness in her voice made him turn. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. Something shuddered, careful, as if she were bracing for impact. "Carenza, say what you're thinking," her chin lifted. "Don't soften it. Don't pretend. Just say it. I'm thinking that last night was a mistake." The words fell between them like stones into still water. He watched the ripple spread across her face, hurt, then anger, then something worse, resignation. "A mistake," she repeated quietly. "Not because I didn't want it. Not because I don't." He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "Because I promised to court you properly, publicly, with honor. And instead, I came to your bed like a thief in the night. I invited you. That doesn't make it right." She was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she rose from the bed, wrapping herself in her dressing gown with deliberate care. "I see." "Carenza." "No, I understand perfectly." Her voice was flat, emotionless. You regret what happened. You wish you had made a different choice. You want to pretend this night never occurred. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? Now there was fire in her eyes. Because from where I stand, it looks exactly like the Ashworth ball all over again. You want me, you admit it, and then the moment reality intrudes, you retreat behind duty and propriety and all the other shields you use to avoid feeling anything. That's not fair, isn't it? She stepped closer, her gaze burning. Tell me, Dristan, when the hunt ends, when you return to Ravenmoor, what happens then? Do we continue this courtship across 200 miles of letters and occasional visits? Or do you decide that last night was an aberration, a momentary weakness, something to be filed away and forgotten? I would never forget this. But you would move past it. Her voice cracked. You would convince yourself it was a mistake, that we're too different, that the obstacles are too great. You would find a suitable wife from a suitable family, someone who doesn't come with scandal attached, someone who doesn't challenge you, and you would marry her and spend the rest of your life being exactly what everyone expects you to be. He stared at her, the accuracy of her words cutting deep. Because she was right. That was exactly what the old Dristan would have done. The man who had fled from the Ashworth ball rather than face his feelings. The man who had spent 6 years hiding behind duty and distance. I don't want that anymore, he said quietly. Don't you? No. He crossed to her, took her face in his hands. I want you. I want mornings like this, waking up beside you. I want the complications and the scandals and whatever else comes with it. I want to stop running. Then why are you panicking? Because I'm terrified. The admission scraped out of him. Because wanting something this much has always ended badly for me. Because the last time I let myself feel this way, I destroyed everything rather than risk being hurt. Her expression softened. And now? Now I'm standing here, trying to figure out how to deserve you. His forehead pressed to hers. Trying to find a way to make this work that doesn't ruin everything you've built. What if I don't care about what I've built? You should care. This estate, your reputation, your independence. You fought for all of it. I won't be the reason you lose it. She pulled back slightly. So what do you propose? That we do this properly? He took a steadying breath. I'll return to my room through the connecting door. We'll appear separately at breakfast. We'll continue the courtship publicly, appropriately, until the hunt ends. And then I'll speak to Piers formally, request his blessing, and begin the process of making you my wife. Your wife. If you'll have me. She stared at him for an endless moment. Then quietly she said, Go, Carenza. Go back to your room. Be proper. Be appropriate. Her voice was steady, but he could see the tears gathering in her eyes. We'll do this your way, the correct way. That's not... I'm trying to protect you. I know. She stepped back. But Dristan, don't ever call what happened between us a mistake again. He wanted to argue, wanted to pull her back into his arms and damn the consequences. Instead, he nodded once and retreated through the connecting door. It closed behind him with terrible finality. And when he pressed his palm against the wood, he heard, unmistakably, the sound of her weeping on the other side. The third day of the hunt dawned bright and cold, and Dristan descended to breakfast, feeling like he had aged a decade overnight. Carenza was already in the dining room, presiding over the table with perfect composure. Her eyes were clear, her smile practiced, her manner toward him politely distant. She had rebuilt her walls in the hours since he left, and they were higher than ever. He took his seat, accepted coffee from a servant, and tried not to stare at her. The hunting party assembled after breakfast. The prince was in excellent spirits, declaring that today's hunt would be the finest of the season. Hale remained conspicuously absent. He left early this morning, Lady Isolde murmured, appearing at Dristan's elbow. claimed urgent business in London, but he was seen writing letters last night, and his expression suggested those letters contained nothing pleasant. Drystan's stomach dropped. What kind of letters? The kind that end careers and reputations, I imagine. Lady Isolde's eyes were sharp. You should warn Lady Carenza. Whatever Hale is planning, she's the target. The hunt proceeded, but Drystan couldn't focus. His mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Hale had resources, connections, a wounded ego, and a vicious streak. If he chose to spread rumors about Carenza, about their supposed impropriety, the damage could be catastrophic. By midday, confirmation arrived. A rider appeared on the horizon, galloping toward the hunting party with obvious urgency. He reached the prince first, handed over a sealed letter, and spoke in low tones that made the prince's expression darken. Lady Carenza. The prince's voice cut through the chatter. A word, please. Carenza guided her horse forward, her face carefully blank. The prince passed her the letter without comment. Drystan watched her read it, watched the color drain from her face, watched her hands begin to tremble. Your Highness, her voice cracked. Is it true? The prince's tone was carefully neutral, but his eyes were cold. Lord Ashbury claims you and the Duke of Ravenmore were seen entering the same room last night. That you were not alone. That your recent courtship is nothing more than a cover for a liaison that began days ago. The hunting party had gone silent, every eye fixed on Carenza. Your Highness, this is slander. Drystan urged his horse forward. Hale is acting out of spite because Lady Carenza rejected his proposal. Perhaps, but he claims to have a witness. The prince studied them both. A servant who saw you, Ravenmore, outside Lady Carenza's door in the small hours of the morning. Drystan's blood went cold. If this accusation is false, it can be refuted, the prince continued. If it is true, however, the consequences will be severe. Lady Carenza's reputation would be destroyed. Your courtship would be viewed as nothing more than damage control, and I would be forced to reconsider my support for this match. Your Highness, Carenza's voice shook, but she held his gaze directly. The Duke and I have done nothing improper. It was a lie. They both knew it. But it was also necessary. Then you won't object to an investigation. The prince's expression gave nothing away, his royal training rendering him inscrutable, even to those who had known him for years. I'll have my secretary speak with the servants, examine the evidence, determine the truth of these allegations. If Hale's claims are baseless, he'll answer for them. If they're not. He let the threat hang. The hunt resumed, but the atmosphere had curdled. Guests whispered behind gloved hands. Speculative glances followed Drystan and Carenza everywhere. By evening, the situation had deteriorated further. 3 servants have confirmed seeing you in the corridor outside Carenza's room, Piers reported grimly. None can say with certainty that you entered her room, but the implication is damning enough. Hale paid them off. Probably. But proving that is nearly impossible. Piers ran a hand through his hair. Drystan, what the hell happened last night? Nothing. Don't lie to me. I'm her brother. Drystan held his gaze. What do you want me to say? That I love her? That I would marry her tomorrow if she'd have me? That I would burn my entire life to the ground before I let Hale destroy hers? Piers stared at him for a long moment. Then quietly, he said, That's exactly what you may have to do. What do you mean? I mean that right now, the only way to silence the rumors is to make them irrelevant. Piers's expression was grave. Marry her, Drystan. Tonight, before Hale's accusations can take root. That's insane. It's practical. A married woman's reputation is protected. If you wed her now, whatever happened between you becomes private, sanctioned, no longer anyone's concern. The prince would never allow. The prince values stability above all else. A quiet wedding protects everyone involved. Piers gripped his shoulder. I'm not suggesting this lightly, but if you don't act, Carenza will lose everything, and you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you could have saved her and didn't. Dristan stared at him, the weight of the choice pressing down. Marry her. Tonight. Bind himself to her permanently, irrevocably, with no courtship, no planning, no gradual building of trust. It was madness. It was also the only way. "Where is she?" he asked. "The library. She's been there for hours, refusing to see anyone." Dristan moved. He found her standing by the window, staring out at the darkening sky. She didn't turn when he entered. "Come to check on your investment." Her voice was bitter. "Make sure your scandalous almost wife hasn't thrown herself from the balcony? I've come to ask you something. More questions. Wonderful." She finally turned, and he saw that her eyes were red-rimmed, her composure cracking. "What else could you possibly need to know? I need to know if you'll marry me." She went very still. "Not eventually. Not after a proper courtship. Tonight." He crossed to her, took her hands in his. "The prince has a chaplain traveling with him. Piers can serve as witness. We can be wed within the hour." You can't." "I can. I am." He gripped her hands tighter. "Hale's accusations will destroy you unless we make them meaningless. A married woman cannot be ruined by rumors of an affair with her own husband. You're suggesting we marry to save my reputation. I'm suggesting we marry because I love you. Because I was going to ask you eventually anyway. Because the only thing Hale's plot has done is accelerate a timeline I'd already decided on." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You love me. Completely. Irrevocably." He raised her hands to his lips. "I should have said it last night. I should have said it 6 years ago. But I'm saying it now, and I'm asking you to marry me. Tonight. Regardless of scandal or consequence." "Dristan, say yes." His voice broke. "Please, Carenza. Let me fight for you. Let me prove that I'm not the man who ran away at the Ashworth ball. Let me be worthy of you." She stared at him, tears streaming freely now. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "Yes." The prince's chaplain was a small, nervous man named Father Whitley, who clearly had not anticipated performing an emergency wedding during a hunting expedition. "This is highly irregular," he muttered, fumbling with his prayer book. "Highly irregular indeed. And yet necessary." The prince himself had come to witness the ceremony, along with Piers and Lady Isolde, who had somehow inserted herself into the proceedings with impressive efficiency. "Proceed, Father." The library had been hastily arranged for the occasion. Candles flickered on every surface, casting warm light against the leather-bound books and dark wood paneling. A fire crackled in the hearth, filling the room with warmth against the bitter cold outside. Someone had gathered winter roses from the conservatory, arranging them in silver vases that caught the candlelight. Outside, snow had begun to fall, blanketing Thornwood Hall in white silence, as if nature itself was conspiring to seal them in this moment. Carenza stood before the chaplain in the same dress she had worn all day, her hair hastily repinned, and her hands trembling in Dristan's grip. She looked terrified. She looked beautiful. She looked like everything he had ever wanted. "Dearly beloved," Father Whitley began, his voice steadying as the familiar words took over, "we are gathered here." The words washed over Dristan in a blur. He heard them without processing them, his entire focus fixed on Carenza's face, the tears drying on her cheeks, the determined set of her jaw, the way her fingers gripped his as if she would never let go. "Do you, Dristan Aldrich Mercer, Duke of Ravenmore, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Carenza Elspeth Whitaker, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" She met his eyes, held his gaze. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by God and the crown, I pronounce you man and wife." It was done. Dristan leaned down and kissed her, soft and reverent, sealing the vows they had just made. She kissed him back with desperate tenderness, and when they parted, she was smiling through fresh tears. "Well," the prince said dryly, "that should silence Lord Ashbury's accusations rather effectively." "Your Highness," Tristan turned, keeping Carence's hand firmly in his. "I want Hale to face consequences for this. He slandered my wife. He attempted to destroy her reputation with fabricated evidence." "Allegedly fabricated." The prince's expression was thoughtful. "Though I confess, his departure this morning suggested a guilty conscience. I'll have my people investigate. If he paid servants to lie, there will be a trail. And if you find proof, then Lord Ashbury will discover that the Crown does not appreciate those who weaponize scandal for personal gain." The prince inclined his head. "For now, enjoy your wedding night, such as it is." He departed, taking the chaplain with him. Lady Isolde lingered long enough to offer congratulations and a knowing smile before following. Piers remained. "Well," he said, "that was dramatic." "Piers," Carence started. "Don't." He pulled her into a fierce embrace. "I'm not angry. I'm not even surprised. I've watched you two circle each other for years, too stubborn to admit what was obvious to everyone else." He released her, turned to Drystan. "You have my blessing, for whatever it's worth, and my warning." "I expected nothing less." "Hurt her," Piers said quietly, "and no title in England will protect you from what I'll do." "Understood." Piers nodded once, then left them alone. The library fell silent. The fire crackled. Snow continued to fall outside the windows. "We're married," Carence said slowly, as if testing the words. "We are. An hour ago, I thought my life was over, that Hale had destroyed everything." She laughed, slightly hysterical. "Now, I'm a duchess. Does that bother you?" "It terrifies me." She held his gaze. "I've been alone for so long, relied on no one but myself. The idea of being tied to someone else, of depending on them, of trusting them with everything. I know." He pulled her closer. "I feel the same fear. But I've learned something these past few days." "What?" "That being alone isn't strength. It's just survival." His forehead pressed to hers. "I don't want to survive anymore, Carenza. I want to live. With you." She was crying again, but differently now. Not from fear or grief, but from something brighter. Relief, perhaps. Or hope. "I love you," she whispered. "I've loved you for 6 years, even when I hated you for breaking my heart. Even when I told myself I was over you. Even when I convinced myself that what I felt was just foolish infatuation. It wasn't foolish. No." She smiled through her tears. "It was the truest thing I've ever felt." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and she melted into him with a sigh that sounded like surrender. "Like homecoming. We should go upstairs," she murmured against his mouth. "The guests will expect us to disappear for a while." "Will they? It's our wedding night, such as it is." She echoed the prince's words with a wry smile. "Though I believe we've already had our wedding night, technically speaking. That was before vows." He traced her jawline with his thumb. "This will be different." "Different how?" "You'll see." He took her hand and led her from the library, up the stairs, past the curious gazes of servants and the knowing smiles of guests who had already heard the news. Word traveled fast in country houses. Their rooms waited at the end of the corridor. The connecting door stood open now, no longer a symbol of temptation, but a passage between two spaces that were finally, irrevocably, one. "Drystan," she said as they crossed the threshold. "Thank you." "For what?" "For fighting for me." Her voice wavered. "For not running away this time. For choosing this. Choosing us, even when it was terrifying. You're worth the terror." He closed the door behind them. "You're worth everything." She pulled him toward the bed, and this time there was no guilt, no fear of discovery, no morning after regret waiting in the wings. There was only the two of them, finally free to love each other without barriers. And when they came together, it was with the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. The news of their marriage spread through the hunting party by morning, reached London by afternoon, and had become the scandal of the season by nightfall. The Duke of Ravenmore, one of England's most eligible bachelors, married in secret to a woman of lesser rank during a snowstorm. The gossips hardly knew where to begin. Drystan received the first letter from his mother before breakfast had concluded. It was 3 pages of barely contained fury, demanding explanations, threatening consequences, insisting that he return to Ravenmore immediately to discuss this disastrous decision. "She's not pleased," he observed, passing the letter to Carenza. "I imagine not." Carenza scanned the contents, her expression unreadable. "She calls me a fortune hunter of the most brazen variety. How charming. My mother has always prioritized bloodlines over character. She'll come around." "Will she?" Carenza set the letter down. "Drystan, I understand what this marriage has cost you. Your family's approval, your place in society's inner circles, the carefully planned future your parents envisioned. None of which I wanted. That doesn't make the loss less real." She held his gaze. "Are you certain you won't regret this? In a year or 10, when the scandal has faded and you're left with the consequences? The consequences being married to the woman I love?" He took her hand. "I'll survive." The hunting party concluded that afternoon. Guests departed with varying degrees of warmth, some offering genuine congratulations, others barely concealing their disapproval. Lord Pemberton, still recovering from his broken leg, sent word that he was grateful for their care during his convalescence and wished them every happiness. The prince left last, pulling Drystan aside for a private word. "You've made a bold choice, Ravenmore. I've made the only choice that mattered. Perhaps," the prince studied him, "I'll tell you what I told Lord Ashbury before his hasty departure. The crown values loyalty, discretion, and courage. You've demonstrated all 3 this week. That will not be forgotten. And Hale is being investigated as we speak." The prince's smile turned cold. "I suspect his business dealings will prove as unsavory as his personal conduct. By spring, the Ashbury title may be significantly diminished." It was a small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. The weeks that followed were challenging. Letters arrived daily from disapproving relatives, former allies who suddenly discovered prior commitments, society matrons who found reasons to exclude the new Duchess of Ravenmore from their gatherings. Carenza bore it with characteristic grace. "They'll come around," she said one evening, sorting through yet another stack of declined invitations. "Or they won't. Either way, I refuse to measure my worth by their acceptance. You shouldn't have to deal with this at all. I chose this." She looked up at him. "I chose you, knowing full well what it would cost. I don't regret it for a moment." He crossed to her, pulled her from her chair, and kissed her soundly. "What was that for?" she asked breathlessly. "For being you, for being stronger than anyone I've ever known." He cupped her face in his hands. "For making me better, simply by existing. Flatterer. Truth-teller." He kissed her again, softer this time. "Come to bed. The letters can wait." "The letters can burn, for all I care." She smiled against his mouth. "But yes, bed sounds preferable." Spring arrived slowly, melting the snow and bringing with it unexpected changes. Hale's investigation revealed a web of financial improprieties that resulted in his quiet exile to the continent. The servants who had testified against Carenza recanted their statements, claiming coercion. The scandal, deprived of fuel, sputtered and died. More surprising was the thaw from Drystan's family. His mother arrived at Thornwood Hall in April, ostensibly to inspect her new daughter-in-law. She stayed 3 weeks, during which her icy demeanor gradually softened as she witnessed the reality of Drystan and Carenza's marriage. "You're happy," she said on her final evening, sounding almost confused by the concept. Completely. And she manages this estate rather well, better than most stewards I've seen. She's extraordinary. His mother studied him for a long moment. Then quietly, she said, "Your father would have disapproved of this match. He valued connections above all else. I know. But your father also died miserable, surrounded by allies who cared nothing for him beyond what he could provide." She paused. Perhaps there's something to be said for choosing differently. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't quite acceptance, but it was a beginning. By summer, Carenza was pregnant. The hunting horn sounded across the grounds of Thornwood Hall, exactly as it had nearly 2 years ago. But everything else had changed. Dristan stood on the front steps, watching riders stream across the frost-covered fields. Beside him, Carenza held their son, 5 months old, and already showing his father's stubborn temperament. "He's going to want to ride before he can walk," she observed, as the baby reached toward the horses with chubby, demanding hands. "He comes by it honestly." Dristan slipped an arm around her waist. "I was on horseback at 2, drove my mother to distraction." I can imagine. The prince's hunting party had returned to Thornwood Hall at his specific request, a mark of royal favor that silenced the last of society's whispers. This time, there were no accusations, no scandals, and no desperate midnight decisions. Just a celebration of what had emerged from the chaos of that first gathering. A marriage that had defied expectation and flourished despite every obstacle placed in its path. "Do you ever think about it?" Carenza asked quietly. "How different things might have been?" "Sometimes." He pulled her closer. "I think about what would have happened if I hadn't come to the hunt, if I had refused the prince's invitation. You would have married someone appropriate, someone your mother approved of. I would have been miserable." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I would have spent my entire life wondering what might have been if I had just been brave enough to choose you. But you were brave." She turned in his arms, careful not to jostle the baby. Eventually, he smiled. It only took 6 years, and a catastrophic snowstorm, and a public scandal, and an emergency wedding. When you say it like that, it sounds almost romantic. It was romantic, in a disastrous, complicated, utterly impractical way. She laughed, the sound bright and free, and he thought, as he often did these days, that he had never known happiness until this moment. Piers appeared in the doorway behind them. "The prince is asking for you both, something about a toast." "Of course." Carenza handed the baby to his waiting nurse. "We'll be right there." But she lingered for a moment, her hand finding Dristan's. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For coming back." She squeezed his fingers. "For the hunt. For me. For everything that came after. I would do it all again." He brought her hand to his lips. "Every difficult conversation, every sleepless night, every disapproving letter. All of it. 1,000 times over. Even the scandal? Especially the scandal," he grinned. "It made for an excellent story." She swatted his arm, but she was smiling. "You're impossible." "I'm yours." He pulled her toward the door. "Completely, irrevocably, yours." They entered the great hall together, where guests had gathered around the prince's raised glass. The room fell silent as they appeared. The Duke and Duchess of Ravenmore, the couple whose unlikely union had become the season's most talked-about success. "A toast," the prince declared, "to our gracious hosts, to the Duke and Duchess of Ravenmore, who have proven that the best matches are not always the most expected ones. May your happiness continue for many years to come." Glasses raised throughout the hall. Cheers echoed off the ancient walls, filling the room with warmth and celebration. And Dristan, standing beside the woman he had loved for 6 years and nearly lost forever, felt the last of his old fears dissolve. Some choices were truly worth fighting for. Some loves were worth every sacrifice. And some storms, it turned out, were exactly what was needed to bring 2 people home to each other at last.